Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. Last time we started the book of 2 Kings, and so we're very early on in that, but that's what we're working through right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of good, starting with it. And really the big thing that happened last week was Elisha, the prophet, took over for Elijah, the prophet.
So now we don't have both of them anymore. We can just focus on one.
Exactly.
We just have to remember which one.
Yeah. So Elisha was there when Elijah actually got taken up into heaven, and the fiery chariot, the whole thing, kind of a cool deal.
Yeah.
And all of last week was getting to know bald Elijah, and I'm not making fun of him. If you were with us, there were some problems when some people made fun of him last week. So last week we ended in the middle of chapter 4 with a couple miracles that Elijah did, and now we're in chapter 4, and we are going to start with a couple
more miracles with Elisha, and just sort of continue following his narrative, his journey here.
Yeah. So Elijah was with a bunch of other prophets, and they were in a land, and the land had famine in it, which happens a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So somebody put a pot on the fire. I assume they put water in. Somebody else went out in the field, was gathering some herbs, and then they also found a vine, so they grabbed that. And then there was also some fruit on those vines too, and they had their robe was full of it, and you could see them, dumping it in the pot. So everybody's eating, and you can kind of see somebody going. It turned out the fruit was poison.
Yeah, somebody looks and says, "What did you put in there? This is poison."
Yeah, so everybody's freaking out, and Elijah calmly, well, I didn't say calmly, but I assume calmly gets some flour, and he throws it in the pot.
And
that was it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, right?
Right. So my thing is, there's some holes in this story, and the biggest hole I saw was people were eating, and Elijah threw the flour in the pot. It didn't say that they ate more from that pot. So wouldn't the people already still had the poison that they had in with them? And because that story didn't sit well with me, I decided to take a harder look at it. And I don't know if we should do it that way. But the idea is, if you look at it another way, it could be the nation of Israel as the pot being poisoned. And that would be the prophet Baal and other foreign idols. And then the prophets coming and interjecting God back in there, as denoted with the flour, and taking the poison away. Or I'm reading way too much into it. So the question is, how do you tell it? How do you know when to stop?
So that would be what we would call spiritualizing the text, right?
Yep.
You're looking for a deeper, hidden spiritual meaning to it.
Yep.
Are all those things true? Is that what was going on? Absolutely. No question. There was the false prophets, false teaching. Elisha comes in, says, no, this is what it's supposed to be. The problem with that is, number one, the text does not say that is what it was symbolizing.
Right.
Okay. Could it have symbolized that? Absolutely. It just doesn't tell us that. Right. Number two, when the flour goes in, it fixed the problem, right? And nobody died. That's not what was happening in Israel at that time. Right. So it would not be, it could be like, this could happen in Israel, but that's not actually what happened.
Right.
So I look at it as we said last week, Elisha is doing these miracles that are almost, as we're reading, it's like just almost like a magician pulling cards out of the air, coins out of the air. It's just one right after another. And he's not, the writer's not giving us a ton of information, but it's like Elijah has a double spirit of Elisha has a double spirit of Elijah, doing twice as many miracles, and just trying, I think, almost to overwhelm the people with, God is still here if you would follow him, right? He just last time threw some salt in water, and it cured it.
Yeah,
right?
a town's polluted water supply.
Yeah, so here he's doing essentially the same thing, except it's even more, because like you said, it's not just the pot, it's everybody who, healed them as well. Right. God is still at work if you would allow him to work. So yeah, could it symbolize more than that? It certainly could. We're just not told that it does. Okay.
So the next miracle is a man from Baal, help me, Shalisha.
Yeah, Shalisha.
So is this a prophet of Baal or is this a location? It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't make sense that it's a foreign idol.
Yeah.
Because this guy is following
Yeah.
the first fruits and giving first fruits to God.
Yeah.
So this man brought food to the prophet to Elijah, and these were the first fruits which they're commanded to, the nation of Israel's commanded to do, give to God in Deuteronomy.
Yep.
So and they're honoring God, and it was enough to make 20 loaves of bread. And Elijah said, "Well, let's set it before the people, and they can eat." And the attendant said, "Well, there's not enough here.
Not enough here, right?"
And the story should start being, I think I've heard this story someplace before. So they sent it out in front of people, and of course it was enough, and there was enough left over too.
Actually, some left over.
Yeah, right.
It sounds like
So it sounds a lot like Jesus feeding
the
4,000 or
5,000.
5,000
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is my point from last time, is that what Elisha is doing, it's almost not novel. Of course, Jesus comes, 800 years later. But it's almost that these are like God is doing the same things over and over. Right. Sometimes we see miracles, and it's like, this has never happened before.
Right. Well, and when you first hear that, it's like, God's a one-trick pony, doing the same thing over and over. But it's also the reinforcement of it, doing over and over. God saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'll show you I'm here. I'll change it up a little bit, but it's still the same thing. I'm still the same God.
Yeah. And when Jesus does this, 800 years later, a couple of times for different groups, it is the same God from 800 years ago, not just the same God from Elijah to Elisha. Right. But we're talking, he's doing things that Moses did 600 years earlier. Jesus is doing things 800 years later that we're talking same God, right. Not same God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in chapter 5, and we still are staying with Elijah, and I like this chapter. So a guy by the name of Naaman, he was a commander in the Syrian army. He's well respected, had a whole bunch of victories, but he also had a skin disease.
Yeah.
And however, there was a young Israeli girl told him, "Look, we have a prophet. He could fix you."
Yeah.
And he said, that sounds good. How do I go about doing this?
Well, he's spent a ton of money. He's tried everything in Syria. He's, prayed to his
and he
gods,
has the means to do this.
Right. to get this fixed or healed, and nothing has worked. So one of his servant girls says, why don't you try the Jewish prophet? You're willing to try anything at this point, right?
Yep. So plans were made, and again, this is a Syria guy coming into Israel, which.
Well, and it's really interesting because the contrast when we get into chapter 6 is really interesting, because in chapter 6 and 7, Israel and Syria are at war with each other. But here, the Syrian king sends a letter to the Israeli king. The Israeli king's like, "Hey, welcome my guy." It's like, on again, off again.
Right. It's this. Yeah. So anyways, plans were made, and this guy shows up to Elijah's house, and Elijah tells his attendants, "Go tell him to wash in the river 7 times, in the Jordan River."
Jordan River 7 times.
The guy got mad.
Yeah.
And he should, and he left, and his servant stopped him and said, "Whoa, wait a minute. If this prophet would have told you to do something amazingly hard, you would have done it.
Yeah.
But he told you to do something very easy, and now you're not going to even try it? Go try it."
Yeah.
Try it.
It doesn't even make sense, right?
Yeah. But you can kind of see it, right? Sometimes we hear the same thing when you share the gospel.
Man,
all you have to do is
too.
trust God and ask Jesus to come into your life. No,
Yeah.
Where's the hook?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
got to be something harder than that.
I will do anything that you tell me to do. I'll do all this stuff if you would save me. Okay, just believe. No, it doesn't work that way, right?
Do I have to run some laps?
Yeah, exactly.
How much money will it cost?
It's exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah. So he goes into Jordan 3 times or 7 times. He's healed.
Ta-da!
Yep. So he goes back to Elijah and offers him a very substantial gift, talents, which are a year's salary, lots of money. And Elijah said, "No, I don't need anything."
Yeah.
So this guy dug some dirt up, put it into a cart, and started going home.
Yeah.
Why would he dig up dirt?
Vandals, vandalizing Elisha's yard. Well, no, because he actually explains. He said he's so overwhelmed with gratitude. He told Elisha, "I will never sacrifice to any of our gods again. I will worship only your God. But can I take some dirt with me?" Because he's still running on a pagan concept. So there's two things. I think two things going on. First of all, he's running on a pagan concept, and one of the major pagan ideas is that their gods are limited in time and space. Right? Your God can work here in Israel. This was Jonah's thing, right? Yeah. If I go out into the sea, you can't get me, right? Yep. Come on, right? So they have gods of seas and gods of land and gods of fields and gods of mountains. That's why you have to have so many gods, right? So one thing may be, if I'm going to worship your God, I have to worship your God on your dirt. Soil. Yeah. So I'm going to make myself a little bed, a raised garden bed with your dirt on it, and so I can build an altar to your God there. That may be one thing, probably. The other side is also the holy ground aspect, right? This is holy ground. Right. You are his prophet. I'm going to worship him. I want to worship him in his space, right? So I want to take holy ground with me. Either way, it accomplishes the same thing. He's going to build an altar or a shrine to Israel's God in Syria, and he doesn't want to do it on Syrian soil. I think it's actually a cool, thoughtful concept that he's doing here.
Yeah, so remember, Nahum was now healed. He had offered a whole bunch of money. He leaves. Elijah's servant, Gehazi, he thought, shouldn't we get some of that money?
We're missing out here.
Yeah,
right?
So he runs out, he stops Nahum and says, look, a couple of prophets just arrived out of the blue. Can I get a talent of silver and 2 suits? Because there was some clothes, 2 suits of clothes. And Naaman happily supplied those.
Of course, right.
So he goes back inside, and just like when you were little and you stole something and you came in and your mother's looking at you, not that it ever happened to me, Elijah looked at him and said, where you been?
Where you been?
Nowhere. So, because he lied, and Elijah knew that he had lied. He said, I was there with you in spirit.
Yeah.
He said, now you're going to have the same skin disease.
Well, and not just lied, but Elisha had said, we're not taking any credit for this. We're not taking any reward for this. And then Gehazi goes out in his name, identity theft, basically, and says, Elisha was wondering if you could actually send some of this stuff back. I mean, he just completely destroyed Elisha's reputation and all sorts of stuff with this guy. It was really bad, right? And he was going to keep it for himself, right? I mean,
that was the
whole thing, right?
Yep. Okay, so in chapter 6, we start off kind of with a random note here. So the prophets needed a bigger meeting place. So I don't know if Elijah's place was too small or where they were meeting. So they all decided to help build this new building together. So they were chopping trees down, and they're by the Jordan River because water, trees need to grow there. And somebody had an axe that they had actually borrowed from somebody. Somehow the axe head came off and went in the Jordan River. So the guy's mad, right? So Elijah comes by and he takes a branch and he throws it into the river around the area where the axe head was, and the axe head floats to the top. They grab the axe head, I assume fix the thing, and continue on with their work.
Yep. Isn't that great?
Should I spiritualize this?
I don't think you should It's just, again, I mean, these one-off things that shows that God is with Elisha and God is with Israel at this time if they would just turn back to him.
Right. Okay, now this next one, I understand at least a little better from a prophet and a miracle standpoint. And this takes up the rest of chapter 6 and all of chapter 7. Yeah. It's really one big event there. So now the king of Syria is at war with Israel.
Which is so,
I know, but keep track. You gotta. It doesn't change. Nothing changes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. All right, but the king of Syria was very frustrated because every time he decided, I'm going to invade Israel here, somehow Israel knew.
Yeah.
And they stopped him from coming in. So he was positive that there was a mole inside. So he's talking to his advisors. We gotta rat this guy out.
Who's the traitor, right?
Yeah. And one of the advisors said, well, it's the prophet Elijah. He obviously knows what's going on, and he's telling the king.
Yeah, he's like, go somewhere else. They're not going to be there,
Yeah. But so in my thinking, wouldn't this king go, God is on their side. They got Elijah. I should probably stop trying to invade them. Instead, his thinking is, if I take Elijah
Take out
out,
Elisha, then the
then I can
problem will be
invade.
solved.
That's what he decides to do, right? He decides to go after Elijah. So they were in a town, Dothan, and that night the town was surrounded by the Syrian army. So when they woke up in the morning, the attendant was like, "We're in serious trouble here,
Yeah.
right? It's a siege. Sometimes those can last years. It's never a good time. The people inside starve versus the people outside getting bored
Yep.
and attacking." And Elisha says, "Hey, wait, don't panic. We got God on our side.
Yeah.
We have a bigger army. Bigger army than they do." And of course, the attendant's like,
Yeah.
I do not see it.
You and what army, right?
Yeah, right. So Elijah prays to God that his attendant can actually see what he sees.
Yeah.
And now when the guy looks around, he sees the fiery horses, the fiery chariots. I assume just like Elijah.
An angelic
And-
army surrounding them.
right, all
How
around.
cool is that?
But got it.
Yes.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, Elijah prays again, and the Syrian army is struck blind. And he actually leads them away from the city into Samaria.
Well, because they're trying to get him, right? They're trying
Yeah.
to get him. So he shows up and says, "Hey, you guys need some help?" And they don't know it's him. They're like, "Yeah, we need help." He's like, "Okay, just follow me."
Right. So this is God striking them dumb and getting them out of the way.
And a little bit of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. So then the king of Israel is there, and he says, "Do we kill him?"
Yeah, because he leads them straight into Samaria.
Right. And Elijah says, "No, it's not for your, you didn't do anything. These are not yours. You don't and I love it. He says, you don't have that right."
Yeah.
And so he says, instead, you should feed them.
Yeah.
Wait, the complete opposite. So the king gives them food, feeds them, and tells them to go back home,
Yeah, sends them back.
which you generally don't do with an army.
Right.
Right. I would say that he was crazy, but then the next sentence says, no Syrian army invaded Israel.
Yep.
So they either went back and thought about it and went, yeah, we can't beat that. We're just going to leave them alone.
Yeah.
Or, something else is going on.
But that didn't stop Syria forever, because later, the very next verse,
Yeah.
he
I was
comes
gonna ask
back
about
and
that.
he it tries again.
Yeah.
Right.
So he besieges Samaria. The food supply is running out in the city. It was getting desperate, right?
Yeah.
The cost for food skyrockets. They tell you how much in there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, skyrockets good
Yeah.
enough, right?
Yeah. I have a
Yeah.
piece of information about that I'll share in just a moment.
Oh, okay. So the king was walking around, kind of surveying what was going on, and he heard and or saw that the people were resorting to cannibalism.
Cannibalism, yeah.
That's how bad it was. That's how desperate everybody was, and he placed the blame strictly on Elijah.
Which
right?
is really interesting, because God, all the way back in Deuteronomy, had said, if you go away from me, here are the things that are going to happen. In cannibalism, he said, you're going to actually get to the place where you're going to eat one another. Oh, that'll never happen.
Right.
God called it 600 years ago, and that's what they're going through right here.
Right. So blaming Elijah because his God didn't help.
Yeah.
And so he said, he's going to have his head cut off. So the king sends a messenger saying he's coming to Elijah's house. Elijah, of course, knows what's going on. He says, when the messenger guy comes, we need to block the door, otherwise they're going to cut off my head.
Yeah.
So the messenger guy comes, they, block the door. The king's yelling at him, the messenger's yelling at him, and really we end this chapter with the messenger saying, why should we have to wait for the Lord?
Yeah.
In there, and that's the way chapter 6 ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, but we're going to go right into chapter 7, and
Yep.
the account keeps going.
Yeah,
right?
so Elijah in chapter 7 says, look, by this time tomorrow, the cost of food is going to be so incredibly cheap, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And again, he says, what it's going to be, and it's 3 shekels for
Well,
for
here's the comparison, because he does give the price
Yeah, right,
points.
right,
because he
right.
does give the price points. Here's how it is when it's so high right now. The reason it's cannibalism, it says that a pint of dove dung. I mean,
Right.
they're eating dove poop now.
Right.
A pint of dove dung is going for let's say 5 shekels.
Right.
Okay, 5 pieces of money. By this time tomorrow, it said 11 quarts. 11 quarts, which is 22 times the amount, but not of dove dung, but of finely milled flour. So not even just right off it, but like processed, like ready to use, high grade, high quality. So we're talking is going to be only 1 shekel, not 5 for a pint, but 1 for 11 quarts. We're talking more than 100 times the value. That's how drastic this is going to change. Like more than 100 times it's going to do, and it's just unbelievable. Okay. And so not only that, I mean, they're going to be eating like real food instead of dove dung. I mean, they talk about a donkey's head.
Yeah,
is 80. I mean, it's just the
unbelievable prices.
Crazy stuff you shouldn't be eating. Number one, at exorbitant. There's no food.
Right.
And tomorrow it's going to the highest grade, the highest quality is going to be
So
pennies.
So the messenger's like, how can this happen? Even if it rains, it's going to take time
even
for
if
the
it
food to
rains
grow.
Food.
Yeah. So there's 4 men at the city gate, and these 4 men all had a skin disease, which is probably why they were at the city gate to begin with, right? Because they wouldn't have been allowed into the city itself.
Yeah.
Now their situation is already hopeless, right? They have the skin disease. They can't be part of society. Their town is under siege. They're going to be the last ones that are going to get any food.
Oh, yeah.
So they're like, what if we went over to the opposing army and see if we can help them?
Yeah.
And maybe they'll take us in. Maybe they won't kill us. If they kill us, we're
dying
going to die
anyway.
anyways.
Yeah.
Right. So they walk over into this camp, and they realize there's nobody in the camp. So their first thought is, let's take their stuff.
Yeah.
So they take a bunch of the stuff and they bury it. And now they're, doing other stuff. And finally somebody looks around and says, guys, we need to go back and report this.
Yeah.
Because we're going to look like complete idiots in the morning when they figure this out. So they go to the gate. Of course, they got to yell to the gatekeeper, hey, we don't want in, but there's nobody over there.
Yeah.
And the gatekeeper, okay, I'll tell the king. So they tell the king, and the king, of course, knows it's a trap.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't it be? But the guys are like, we got 5 horses. Let's spend 2 of them and send 2 guys over there. They can check it out and let us know. So the two guys take off on the horses, and they follow a trail of clothes and discarded items that the army that was there left with and shredded on their way leaving.
So the Syrians got spooked. God spooked them. Okay. Yep. And they took off so fast that they're shedding armor, they're shedding anything that's going to weigh them down. Yep. They didn't even stop long enough to get on their horses. That's how, they're still tied up.
Yeah.
The horses are still tied up. They took off so fast that they're running as fast as they can. They left everything behind. So weapons, food, clothes, everything.
Right. So this is where they're going to get all the food.
Yeah.
Right. And all this stuff.
Yeah.
So now they come back and
it's all prepared food. It's ready for them, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So it just so happens the messenger that had criticized Elijah was actually at the city gate on guard.
Yep.
The people or the 2 guys on the horses come back, explain what's going on. Everybody hears it. Everybody takes off out of town.
Yep.
Through the city gate. The guy's in the way. He gets trampled and he dies.
And Elisha had said, because you didn't believe, you are going to see it, hear about it, but you don't get to experience it.
Yeah, you don't get to eat.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yep. This one I like better. Which is kind of weird saying that now with all that, but understand that miracle.
Yeah, but again, we've had now one chapter after another of big things, little things, one-off things, salt, flour, bears, whatever, of God proving himself time and time again to the people. And again, we're talking in the northern kingdom, so far away from God.
Right. Yeah, that he has to do the miracles just to get their attention.
Yeah. And they are receiving benefit and they're still not following him.
Right.
Still one wicked king after another. Elisha, if he had any hair, would have should have been pulling his hair out. Like, what is
else?
going on? Why are you guys not looking at responding to this?
Yeah. Interesting time to live, though.
Yeah. Well, that takes us 7 chapters into 2 Kings now. Lots of Elisha. Eventually, he's going to have to die, and we're just going to
Move
have
on to other kings.
a void of major prophets. But this is one of the most concentrated times in the Northern Kingdom's history of prophets and prophetic word from God with Elijah and Elisha, and it only gets worse. And it's really crazy. I mean, we look at it and we say, how could this be? But we can see it in our world today. The further we get away from God, the further a nation or a people group or a church or a family gets away from God, it's like almost nothing will get through to them. But that doesn't mean God isn't at work. And so that's one of the big takeaways here. God is still gracious. He is still calling people back to him. And he'll do so for as long as people live, as long as they're alive. So that's a big takeaway. Hopefully that's encouraging to you. As we've said before, maybe you're praying for someone to come back to God. As long as they're alive, there's hope. And so keep sharing the gospel, keep praying for them, keep working on them, and asking God to do the same. So again, hopefully that's encouraging. We'll pick up here next week as we continue the story of Elisha and the Northern Kingdom, and we'll pick up and see what's going on in the Southern Kingdom as well. See you then.
Bye.